Hello, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello. Welcome back to another episode. Thank you for sharing some of your time with me. It is just you and me today. I'm going to be sharing today a number of the different ways that I manage my own anxiety. I'm 50. My first symptoms of anxiety were when I was 4. I have been creating a weekly podcast, this very podcast, Well, Hello Anxiety, for 3 years. I have met and talked with so many people. I have had so much professional help myself. And there are many strategies that I put into place daily, weekly, all the time that I wanted to share with you so that you can have a better understanding of me. If you're a new listener, welcome, a very warm welcome to this beautiful community of listeners. You may not know too much about my background depending on where you've started listening. And so I wanted to give you more of an insight into what my journey has been like. So many people tell me that their own journey is reflected in mine and that there are so many similarities, and that's not uncommon. Many of our stories will be similar or even somewhat the same. My name is Dr. Jodi Richardson, and I am a speaker. I speak in schools and in workplaces and to community organisations about anxiety and well-being and stress and resilience. I am an author of 2 books, Anxious Kids and Anxious Mums, and of course, your host here on the podcast. My story really does begin when I was 4, and the reason I know I was 4 is because it was my very first year of school. And what we know about the research when it comes to anxiety is that 50% of anxiety disorders start before the age of 14. So it's very much something that begins in childhood. But when it's treated early, adults who once had anxiety as children can live symptom-free. Many can live without the weight and the burdens and the challenges of anxiety that might have once been a part of their life. Unfortunately for me, I did not get help in primary school, but I did eventually, and ultimately that's what's brought me to be so passionate about and on this mission to help anyone and everyone know that anxiety is a normal part of life. Not all anxiety is a disorder, and that we can be anxious and do the things that are important for us anyway. Going back to primary school, I distinctly remember coming home from school and telling my mum, I feel sick, I felt sick all day, I don't want to go to school. Of course, mum took me to get checked at the GP, as mums do, and nothing was wrong. Admittedly, the doctors would have checked me over and I had no fever, I had no virus, I had no rash, I had no vomiting or any other kind of physical symptoms. And so I was deemed to be well and healthy and, of course, sent to school every day. And I am so thankful. I mean, in a way, it's tough because I grew up as a child who suffered for a very, very long time with a head full of worries and all of these physical symptoms that nobody knew about. But also on the flip side, in a positive way, because it wasn't well understood and it appeared there was nothing wrong, I say in quotation marks, I was sent to school every day and I wasn't allowed to kind of, I guess, give in to what anxiety was saying, which was don't spend time in the place that is kind of causing all of these anxious symptoms. Now, of course, none of this was consciously available for me to think about at the time. All I knew was when I was at school, I felt sick in the tummy and I didn't want to be there. And I look back and I can see that the environment in my prep class was a really tense environment. We had over 50 children in a double class with 2 teachers. And my teachers were really stressed and overwhelmed. Of course they were. I completely understand that that's where they were coming from. And that stress and that tension, it's contagious. We know that this happens in families, this happens in workplaces, that where we kind of pick up on the emotions of the people that we spend a lot of time with. And that was, of course, my experience as well. My anxiety symptoms quickly developed into troubles with my breathing, which is, again, a really common physical symptom. one of the things I've worked really hard through the podcast and my other work to help you to know and to remember is that yes, it is a psychological condition, but it presents in our physiology in ways that are really obvious and can help us to understand more about what we're experiencing and perhaps put the pieces of the anxiety puzzle together more quickly. I also want to point out that, as I mentioned before, anxiety is a normal everyday emotion. We get anxious about the things that we care about. In a year 12 or year 11 or any student doing an exam or presenting to their class or going on camp or doing something like handing in a resume or asking somebody on a date. As an adult, if you've applied for a job, you've hired someone, you've fired someone, you're speaking to your peers in a meeting, you're disagreeing with a colleague in a boardroom, all of these things are going to bring up some sort of anxiety because the outcome is unknown, there's uncertainty. But once we move through that experience, we share our idea, we present our poster in front of our class, we sit the exam, those anxieties fall away. It's not like a switch, it doesn't turn off. You'll know that if you've ever had a terrible fright on the road and your sympathetic nervous system is activated and that you go into fight or flight and you're breathing fast and your heart's racing, the minute you know you're safe, all of those physiological changes start to settle, but they don't switch off in an instant. It takes a little bit of coming down from that. And we do know that anxiety triggers the stress response. So normal anxiety comes and goes with a stressful event, and we get anxious about the things we care about. And so if we're going to do the things that are important, we're going to feel some anxiety. We can notice it, we can acknowledge it, we can name it, and we can put a practical strategy into place that will help to settle it down, and we can move ahead and do what we need to do, what we want to do, what's important for us to do. Anxiety that is a disorder gets in the way of daily life. It gets in the way of function. It stops us from being able to do the things, the everyday activities that we would really love to be doing. And this is a huge challenge for so many people. Anxiety is the most common of all of the mental health conditions. And we know that 1 in 5 Australians at any time is living with an anxiety disorder. And we also know that the majority of anxiety that an adult is living with began in childhood, unless there's been a particular event in adulthood that has triggered it. And I was listening to an anxiety symposium just today, and there's incredible research around the brain, looking at infants, looking at newborns and infants and toddlers and children, and looking at pathways in the brain and activation in the brain that can sort of give us a little bit of an insight into whether or not this young person might have the kind of temperament that could lend itself towards them being more anxious. So the great thing we know about anxiety is that whilst it's very common and it can be absolutely horrendous and painful, and that has been my experience for a lot of my life, not anymore, it is treatable. Most people who identify that anxiety is an issue or get the identification through the help of a professional, of course, can get treatment and have access to that treatment. It is a treatable condition, it is manageable, and I am living, breathing proof of that. As I sit here today recording this episode, I can feel that my breathing is a little affected. That was one of the symptoms that came on soon after I started to have an upset tummy. And it is still a symptom of my anxiety, but I can say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Why? Well, because I care about this. Because this is my life's work, is to make a difference. And when I'm recording an episode like this and it's just me, I am really focused on trying to give you the best value for the time that you are spending with me, so that you feel seen and heard. You know you're not alone. You can understand more about your experience or the experience of somebody that you care about, and that you feel more empowered and more confident with what to do next, or where at least to get the help if you're not sure what to do next yourself. And that's why today I want to share with you a little bit more about my journey and the really significant steps I've taken to manage my own anxiety, what I've learned along the way, why the strategies that I put into place and the activities that I do and the ways that I manage my anxiety, why they work, in the hopes that if you're not familiar with one of these ideas or you have questions about one of these approaches, that some of those might be answered today and that you feel better equipped to think about what you could do. Because I can tell you this for sure, when it comes to our mental health, we need to be active participants in our treatment. And so, yes, medication is available to us, but it should always be taken in conjunction with some sort of talk therapy. There is no magic pill. Certainly medication plays a role, and that's something important I want to talk about. But we need to be active participants. It will enrich your life, boost your mood, lower your anxiety, and open up possibilities for you if you can start to do one or two of the ideas that I share today if you're not already. So after my symptoms began in primary school, I started sharing a lot of what I was going through, pretty much everything that I was going through, with my dear mum, Cheryl, who I adore. And she was such a comfort for me, but I know that I was not a comfort for her because she lived with an undiagnosed anxiety disorder. And anytime I would come to her with a worry or an issue or an upset or a sick tummy or I can't breathe, I know that caused a lot of stress and anxiety for her, but she never let on when I was a child, and I'm so thankful that she found the strength to be able to remain calm and support me when I was struggling, because I leaned on her so much, and it took a long time for me to be able to manage my anxiety alone, which is what I hope for you if you're an adult struggling. Not alone in that nobody will be around to support you, but that you feel equipped and empowered with what you need to look after you. And that is also in conjunction with perhaps your GP or a psychologist or other mental health professional or a psychiatrist, for example. So I would constantly reveal all my worries to my mum, and my mum would reassure me. And that was all I needed. If mum said it was going to be okay, my brain and body took that on board as being, okay, I'm safe, I'm okay, and I can get on with business as usual. However, that wouldn't last. And any reassurance I had would fade away, and I'd very quickly, within the next half an hour or so, be back at mum's side saying, now I'm worried about this, what do you think? And she would say, it's going to be okay. In later primary school, I started to have obsessive thoughts, and they were so frightening, and I didn't understand why I was having the thoughts that I was having. And again, I shared them with my mum, and I'm sure she was so puzzled and just so confused as to what was happening with me. And the reassurance continued, but we did seek the help of a psychologist. And I do remember going and visiting this psychologist. I remember taking a little bit of time off school and having a few appointments, but the psychologist, on reflection, didn't really have a good understanding of what was happening for me and why I was experiencing what I was experiencing. And so that really didn't end well. The psychologist kind of led me down a path that he thought was the answer to kind of what was happening, which was really not relevant to my experiences and what I was thinking and why I was thinking it. And so that was actually really not only difficult because I felt like nobody could help me, but it also somewhat made things worse because I felt like, well, you know, if this particular person doesn't understand what's happening with me and sort of has got it all wrong, what hope is there for me? Is this just something that I have to live with? And it's so painful when you have obsessive thoughts because they just feel so real. They're gut-wrenching. You can feel so sick at the idea of what you're thinking. And we do know our thinking affects how we feel. And then it affects, our emotions. Of course, it affects how we feel in our body. And then it affects what we do. So our thoughts can be so powerful. And you might have an example. You might think you could be going about your day and then you get a reminder of something that's bothering you or of something that's upsetting. And you feel it in your body. Your stomach might drop or your heart might flutter. And so we do know how powerful an effect our thinking can have on our physiology. And that's what I was living with. In high school, things were only getting worse, as you can imagine. Untreated anxiety will tend to get worse, but treated anxiety is manageable and can really make such a profound difference to quality of life. My breathing was such a problem, my parents took me back to the GP and I was diagnosed with asthma. I don't even remember doing a lung capacity test or any kind of expiration tests, but I was given a Ventolin and it didn't work. And I didn't, again, I'm like, why isn't this working? Like, what is wrong? I don't understand. And so you can hear my breathing a little bit now. It's still something that I manage, but my goodness, it has come such a long way. So I kind of have been through all of these years of a head full of worries and these physical symptoms and just this difficulty with kind of coping sometimes when things weren't going well. But it wasn't until I was working, I was about 25, I was working at the time. And this happens, this is not uncommon, that my untreated anxiety ultimately developed into depression, or didn't develop into, but I started struggling with depression as well as my anxiety. And goodness, I think back now, I'm so thankful that happened, as painful and as challenging and as horrific as it was at the time to just feel so hopeless and so sad. That's what took me to the doctor. And I cannot tell you the relief I experienced when my doctor said, after I explained, this is what's happening in my life, I just felt like my life was the stuff of dreams. And then here's me crying all the time, feeling sad and hopeless. And when my GP said to me, hey, I know what this is called depression. Lots of people are going through this. You're not alone in this. And we actually have some really good treatments that can help you. Oh my goodness. It was just like the sun came up for the first time in such a long time. I felt hopeful. And when you're feeling depressed, hope is something that's really lacking. So I guess the very first step I took on this journey to feeling so full of life and thriving and able to sort of do all the things I want to do and manage my anxiety where I am now. I feel like I'm in such a good place. And I'm not anxiety free. I'm not. But the first step towards there was seeing my doctor. And I encourage anybody listening, if you don't have a doctor you trust, ask around for word of mouth. Recommendations can often be really powerful when it comes to things like this. So ask close friends. If you don't have a doctor that you feel you can trust and talk to, ask around, get a recommendation. Our GP, as that kind of first port of call, they're incredible people. The work that they do is phenomenal. And that first step can help you start to understand a little bit about what you're going through, get some reassurance that help is on the way and that you're not alone on this journey, and just that sense that you've got somebody to walk alongside you as you kind of face these challenges. It's hugely reassuring, and that was such a turning point for me, and I'll be ever thankful to that particular GP who I don't see anymore. She moved on to a different practice, and but yeah, forever thankful, because that was an incredible turning point for me. When I was first diagnosed with depression, I was so depressed I couldn't function. It was recommended medication and therapy, and I said yes to both straight away. I wasn't keen on the idea of medication, but I knew I needed some very serious help. So I'm like, throw it all at me. What do I need to do? So I started on an antidepressant, and I started in therapy. The antidepressants started to work within about 6 weeks, but just the fact that I was taking something that would help me, that I knew could make a really powerful difference to the way I was thinking and feeling, just gave me so much more confidence and hope that I was on that path to healing. However, the therapy didn't go so well. I did not click with my first therapist. Not a good kind of connection there, and the approach that this particular therapist was taking just wasn't the right fit for me. So I went back to my GP and was meanwhile talking with a couple of trusted friends in my workplace. And one of my trusted friends recommended someone he knew. I went along to see her. Again, not the right fit. And I was sort of feeling like, oh goodness, like I know therapy can be amazing, but I'm not having that experience. And what am I going to do? I had another recommendation to a third person and hit the absolute jackpot. And Alec became my psychotherapist for years and years. And it's a long journey in therapy. It takes time. Trust and the connection between you and your therapist is really powerful. And so I know in today's times, I'm talking 25 years ago, in today's times, I understand that getting in to see a therapist can be a wait, and that then changing therapists will mean going back to your GP and getting a referral elsewhere, particularly if on a mental health care plan here in Australia, which gives us rebated appointment costs, so you get some money back through Medicare here in Australia. And different countries approach this in different ways, but it can be a little bit of time between getting a referral and ultimately finding the right therapist. But please, if you do find the therapist you're referred to or that your child is referred to doesn't feel like the right fit, go back to the GP, maybe keep regular-ish appointments with the GP so that talking opportunity, even though it's not therapy as such, that opportunity for continued connection and talking and support is available until you can get in to see somebody else. The relationship's really important, and so really I was third time lucky. It's a bit like trying on a pair of jeans. Ladies, I'm sure you hear me. I don't know about you fellas. My husband seems to be able to sort of walk into a shop and walk out pretty quickly with what he needs, but sometimes it can take us a few tries to get the right fit, and it can be the same with finding a counsellor or a therapist who is going to really be there to support us. But it's worth the investment of time to go on that journey, because ultimately the right person is going to make all the difference for your mental health. Coming back to medication, as I started to feel better and feel less depressed and I was starting to undertake therapy, I went through this phase where I'm like, I'm actually like really starting to feel much more like myself. And it's not uncommon to start to think, I'm better, in quotation marks, and perhaps I don't need this medication. And I made the mistake of weaning myself off the medication. And I was 25. I was like, I don't really need to be on this. I've got a therapist. I'm starting to feel better. And I started to really wean myself off very, very slowly. I had advice that would always be the case when coming off medication. And so I did that. And as I weaned myself off the medication, I went significantly downhill again with my mental health. So from my own personal experience, and what I know is the experience of many, is that we can feel like, hey, I'm okay, I don't need this. But in fact, the medication is really making a profound difference, not only to how you're coping day to day, but also to the effectiveness of your therapy, particularly in the early stages, because you need a little bit of space between kind of what's happening and how you respond to be able to use the strategy and incorporate the skills that you're learning in therapy. And I know medication has made a really big difference for me when it comes to that. So please do not follow in my footsteps. Please never, ever take yourself off a medication that is for your mental health without the explicit advice, support, care, and supervision of your medical health professional. I realised that I had a lot of work to do. I spent a lot of time in therapy and worked through over many, many years so much that I needed to talk through with Alec. But ultimately, I came back to medication because I found I just wasn't able to utilise the skills that I was building and developing and practicing without the medication. But that was many, many, many years down the track. One of the things that I did that in conjunction at the time with my talk therapy, I'd taken myself off my medication, as you know. At this time, I was just seeing Alec and getting back into work and starting to function a lot better than I had. One of the things Alec taught me was meditation. And I was childless back then, and I had the time and I had the willingness to do whatever it took to be really proactive. And so I was taught to meditate, and I built up over time and ultimately meditated twice a day for 20 minutes. And I look back to that time and know that the difference the meditation made was life-changing for me. It wasn't easy at first. I felt like I was really bad at meditating, and we all think that. Lots of normal thoughts. Meditation is not about sitting down and not thinking. It's about where we are placing our attention, and our attention will wander, and then we can notice that our attention has wandered, and then we bring it back. A bit like when you're reading a book. You know, when you're reading a book and you're reading the page and then you realize, oh my goodness, I haven't taken any of this in. And like, where will I go back to? What do I remember reading? And we might have to turn the page and go back a few paragraphs and start again because our mind had wandered. And then we noticed our mind had wandered, and then we bring it back to what it was we were meant to be paying attention to. That's what meditation is about. It's not about not thinking. It's about focusing our attention on whatever it is that can be useful. In my meditation practice, it was on my breath, and I had a word that I would silently say to myself as I exhaled, and that was a very grounding word for me. And so I would practice 20 minutes in the morning before work, 20 minutes in the afternoon. And then what I would find was when I felt very stressed or anxious in the middle of the day, I could use a couple of breaths, and as I exhaled, I could silently say my word to myself, and my body was trained to start to settle down and start to unwind and calm down and relax. As I had practiced so much, then I could use that skill of relaxing and calming and grounding my body through meditation in other elements of my day, in other parts of my day, I should say. Meditation is incredibly powerful, and it was really a gateway for me really through that depression. Whilst I wasn't taking medication, but I was still engaged in therapy weekly. And we know that meditation, it really is very calming. It increases our levels of serotonin and dopamine, which are our natural kind of mood boosting chemicals or feel good chemicals. And what we know that it can really help lift the heaviness of depression, which was exactly my experience. We know also that anxiety and depression often go hand in hand. And like my adult experience of my mental health has been that depression has not since then been a part of my experience. It has been anxiety through and through after that initial very, very difficult stage because my anxiety was untreated for so long. But other people find that anxiety and depression are kind of like a pigeon pair when it comes to their mental health. That's really common as well. So meditation can actually really aid with the relaxation response of the body, as I described that experience, particularly when I could use my word, which is essentially kind of like the anchor to my relaxation in my meditation practice. And that's activating the parasympathetic part of the nervous system, that rest and digest, that green zone, that calming aspect. There are so many other benefits about meditation, particularly when it comes to the quality of our sleep, which is profoundly protective when it comes to our mental health for so many reasons. And it really just boosted my resilience. So meditation was a really huge part of my life, and I'm coming back to it. I think having kids and just having postnatal depression. Actually, do you know what? I've just realised I did say before depression wasn't a part of my experience, but I'm literally about to contradict myself, and that's okay, because postnatal depression was a significant part of my experience after having both children. That was actually something that was really difficult. However, that's normal because the experience of previous depressive episode increases your risk of a subsequent depressive episode. I did get help for my mental health under those very tough circumstances of having little people to look after. And so isn't it funny that I kind of said, oh no, that wasn't a problem for me again. Yes, it was. But since the kids are a little bit older and sleep is far more structured, and I get more quality and quantity of sleep, that has not been an issue for me since. One of the other things, if you've listened to the podcast for a long time, you'll know that exercise is something that has always been a really important part of my life. And I look back and I think all those years I didn't know I had any problems with my mental health. I guess we just naturally gravitate to the things that can help us to feel better. And so exercise has been something that I've been engaged in for as long as I can remember, whether it was netball or running. When I was old enough to go to the gym, I started strength training. There are so many reasons exercise is really important when it comes to our anxiety. I want to share a few of them with you. I know that you might be listening thinking, yes, I know all this. I know exercise is good, but I just can't. I don't like it. My dad doesn't exercise, and gosh, it is such a bone of contention. He's like, I don't like it. And it's like, well, it's not about liking it at first. It's about liking what it can do for you. It's about liking how you feel once you've done it. It's about liking the outcome. What happens is once we get started and when we've got this willingness to do it, even if we're not really loving it to begin with, find something you do enjoy, absolutely. But if we just become consistent and we notice a little bit of discomfort, if we're going for a walk and we're huffing and puffing a little bit, or muscles that we might not have used much start to kind of say, hello, I'm here, remember me. Once we get consistent and we are willing to experience a little bit of the discomfort that can come with starting an exercise program, then the benefits are self-propelling for the exercise practice. Do not wait till you are motivated. Do not avoid it because of the discomfort you might feel. It's meant to be actually a little bit uncomfortable. That's when the changes come, particularly with lifting weights. You lift a heavier weight because you build strength, and so we need a little bit of discomfort. And I know that we love to be comfortable. Paul Taylor, he wrote Death by Comfort, fantastic book. I interviewed Paul Taylor on the podcast. We are so used to being cushy and comfy, and I love that too. I love nothing more than just kick back on the couch at night and watch a bit of Netflix and have relaxing, comfortable parts to my day. But if we can put ourselves out of our comfort zone, not out of our safety zone, just out of our comfort zone in small, gradual ways, the benefits are profound. And you know what? I guess the alternative is the terrible discomfort and pain, I'm talking emotional pain, that comes with having an untreated mental health condition. Now, if you're going to weigh up one or the other, because exercise is the most profound prescription for our mental health, and particularly when it comes to anxiety for so many reasons. If you're weighing up one versus the other, I know what I would choose every single day. I know you might think it's easy for you, Jodes. You really enjoy your exercise. It's always been a part of your life. I get that. But there are so many days I don't feel like going. I mean, literally, I trained a couple of nights ago and I was yawning my head off, and I said I could have equally laid down on the couch and had a nap as I could come to my class. And I always think to myself, I'll do what I can with what I've got on the day. Some days I'm working harder than others, and that's okay. I'm there, I'm moving, I'm connecting, and the benefits are just incredible. And I want to tell you some of them because I'm hopefully convincing you, if you are not regularly exercising, I'm hopefully convincing you to bring this in as a part of your routine. One of the reasons exercise is so powerful is because it shifts our attention away from what is making us feel anxious. So when you are focusing on a particular technique, if you're doing a lift at the gym, or if you're out walking and you've got somebody to talk to, or you're out walking and you're listening to this podcast, or paying attention to what's happening around you in nature, or the comings and goings of other people, or if you're at the dog park or the pooches, that moves your attention. What we know about anxiety is that when we are heavily focused on something that is threatening to us, and I'm not talking about something that's going to risk our safety, something that's threatening could be a difficult email, or a conversation we have to have, or a presentation we have to do, or a phone call we have to make. You know, I know people with anxiety where picking up the phone and making a phone call is just so hard. It's just such a hard thing to do. And it can create so much anxiety. When our attention is focused on whatever is sort of triggering that anxiety, it amplifies it. Exercise helps to shift our attention away. It also changes our brain's chemistry. And what it does is it increases the availability of anti-anxiety neurochemicals, chemicals made in our brain. We've got this incredible pharmacy in our brain that helps to really reduce our anxiety. So here are some of them. So serotonin, I mentioned before, it's one of our feel-good chemicals. It helps to regulate our mood. It helps with our sleep and our appetite. When they're balanced, we are more likely to feel calm and content. And so what we know is that when serotonin is low, that we can feel more worried and anxious. And especially when we're exercising and we're also getting some exposure to sunlight, if you can be outside, which I recommend highly, that can actually help boost serotonin production as well. And I recently recorded an episode with Dr. Jenny Brockis. In fact, that was last week's episode, and we talked about the incredibly powerful benefits of being outdoors. And so I really encourage you to go back and have a listen to that one as well. Another one of these incredible chemicals is GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid. I challenge you to say that 10 times fast. So GABA, G-A-B-A, some people call it the brain's chill pill. So it is a calming neurotransmitter. And what it actually helps to do is to kind of slow things down for us. So when we're feeling really overwhelmed, the GABA levels can really help sort of like reduce the excessive thinking and worrying and that kind of overthinking. And there are certain medications that you can take, like benzodiazepines, for example, which work by increasing the activity of GABA, but we have our own natural pharmacy in our brain. And if we are moving, we are helping to release more GABA as well. Yoga, certain breathing techniques as well can make a difference when it comes to GABA. Something else that's released in our brain when we exercise is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. And it's a bit like fertilizer for our brain. So it actually helps the brain cells grow stronger and form and strengthen the connections between brain cells as well. So exercise actually boosts BDNF, and it really helps us not only to kind of learn outside of the exercise that we're doing, and it really improves the health of our brain. It also helps to boost our resilience. And so BDNF is like fertilizer for our brain, and goodness, who doesn't want more of that? Endocannabinoids are another neurotransmitter that are released when we are exercising. And I don't know if you've experienced kind of like the runner's high, you know, that kind of more euphoric feeling that you can feel after you've done a really good exercise session, and that can last for a little while. And so some of that is contributed to the release of endocannabinoids in our brain. And so they help to actually relieve pain, especially during times of really high anxiety, and they help us to really keep things more balanced for us and reduce our stress. And so endocannabinoids, serotonin, BDNF and GABA, these are just some of the kind of nature's pharmacy that we release when we're exercising that really help contribute to the anti-anxiety effects of exercise. Other things that exercise can do for us are to activate the frontal regions of our brain, which enable us to sort of regulate our emotions more so than we would otherwise. And it builds our resources. I mean, I think about my exercise and I think about some of the things that I do when I exercise, and I think, gosh, I did that. That was tough, and I did it, and I'm proud of myself, and that gives me this sort of the confidence, and it empowers me to feel more able to conquer other things that are outside of the gym that are tough and hard. So it boosts resilience. So we boost resilience when we learn about ourselves that we can do hard stuff and we can come out the other side. So many reasons exercise is important. When it comes to anxiety, you're probably wondering, well, how much do I have to do? Okay, you've convinced me exercise is going to make a difference. How much do I have to do? Well, there is evidence that even just one exercise session can make a difference. But when it comes to anxiety, more is better. But I want to put a caveat on that. If you're not an exerciser, get the checks that you need at your GP, because if you are starting an exercise routine and you haven't exercised in a long time, it's worth having your heart checked and check with your GP just to get the sign off. When I did work as an exercise physiologist, I spent a lot of time working with people using exercise as a prescription for beautiful clients I worked with who were struggling with depression and anxiety. And sometimes our session, if they weren't exercising regularly or hadn't exercised before, is that we would literally leave the clinic. We would go for a walk. The clinic was near the beach. We'd sometimes head out for a walk. We'd have a walk and talk. And the difference that it made just having a half an hour walk outside was profound. But it's always good just to get the clearance from your GP if you are not used to exercising. But once you are, start small, start with something you enjoy, and just join a friend if you can and play around. Be a bit curious. Is walking something you like with your favourite tunes playing through your AirPods? Is it listening to a podcast? Is it walking with your dog? Is it going to the pool for a swim? Is it yoga? There are so many options. Does not have to cost money. It can if you want it to, but it doesn't have to. And over time, as you get fitter and stronger, you'll be able to do more. And we need progressive resistance with our weights. We need progressive intensity and volume over time. And highly recommend that you get some advice if you are not comfortable with kind of where to start and what to do. But I really want you to make a start and include exercise as part of your daily routine. And even if it's just 3 or 4 times a week, and pay attention to the differences. Pay attention to how you feel. I want you to tune in after you've done your exercise and consider how you feel. Reflect on your mood and how you're feeling in your mood emotionally and in terms of your anxiety after you've done your exercise. And I'd be surprised if you don't feel markedly better every single time. I hope so anyway. You may notice when you listen to this podcast, sometimes, I need to take a couple of breaths. I need to lengthen my exhale. My breathing, and that is a noticeable symptom, has been something that's always been with me. It's common with anxiety. Our breathing absolutely changes when our stress response is activated. We breathe shorter and shallower breaths and faster, and that's a very normal symptom of sympathetic dominance with our nervous system. What awareness around our breath can do is so much. And one of the activities that I practiced was what was called the cloud breath, because often when we're not breathing properly, we feel like I can't get a full breath. I feel like that now. So I feel like I can't get a full breath. I can't get a satisfying breath. Okay. And that is common as well. I wonder if that's something that you relate to, or one of your children or students perhaps relates to. We often think we need more, but in fact, what we can often be doing is over breathing. So when I was introduced to the cloud breath, at the time when I first started it, within 24 hours, made a noticeable difference to the management of my breathing. And it also has continued to have an effect. And in fact, I was chatting to Pete a couple of nights ago. We've been watching One Quiet Day, and my goodness, the jump scares just send me jumping literally off the couch. And I said to him, you know what, even though I'm getting like startled with this, my breathing's so much better. He goes, do you know what, you have not had problems with your breathing that I've noticed in so long. And what the cloud breath metaphor helps us to do is just to slightly reduce our breath. And so picture a cloud and picture all of your breath for the day, inhaling, exhaling, as a cloud. That's the volume of the breath. Okay. So we've got this cloud, so you can picture this cloud. And over the next 24, 48 hours, what I want you to do, and this is what I did, is reduce the size of that cloud by about 1%. All right, tiny little reduction. Very, very, very small reduction. So it's just a little bit of reduced volume when it comes to our breathing. Now that might mean stifling a yawn, or cutting a sigh a little bit short, or just being mindful of the pace and the rate of your breathing. Within 24 hours of undertaking this activity and applying this strategy, I noticed a measurable difference, and I'd love that to perhaps be something that you might like to try. The other thing that I've talked a lot about on the podcast is the physiological sigh, and cyclic breathing is an extension of that. So when we lengthen our exhale, we slow our heart rate, and that is a very clear sign to our brain that we're not in danger and that the stress response can turn off and we can start to settle our nervous system back down. So the physiological sigh is 2 inhalations and a lengthened exhale like this. When we perform the physiological sigh, we are filling our lungs in a way that really helps to sort of like inflate them properly. That's why we do the 2 inhalations. And then the lengthened exhale, you can, as if you're blowing out a straw, that can help to sort of slow the exhalation and lengthen that exhale. 2 or 3, 4 rounds of that is cyclic sighing. So we do the physiological sigh, in, out, and then we repeat in, out, repeat. And that's cyclic sighing. What that does, as I mentioned, lower the heart rate, start to bring the parasympathetic part of our nervous system back online, running the show, helping us feel more calm. And what it does is it also activates the vagus nerve. And this is a huge part of why this is so effective. And that activates our parasympathetic nervous system, helping us to calm. It also can help us to reduce tension in our body because we often hold so much tension in our muscles when we are anxious. And so it can be a really lovely reset. So 3 or 4 rounds of the physiological sigh can make a really big difference to how you feel. And that's one of the key ways daily that I am managing and settling my nervous system. Something else that I've been doing a lot, and I just get so drawn to it, is getting down into the beach into some cold water. Now, I know how lucky I am to be able to get in the car and in 10 minutes I can be in the bay, Port Phillip Bay, where I live on the Mornington Peninsula. We're very close to the water. But that's not the case for everybody, I know. Perhaps if you can do this with a cold shower, you can do this with a cool bath, you can do this with a cool pool. There are other ways that you can take advantage of this. I love to just go down to the bay, walk out, preferably with Dusty, our border collie, accompanying me for a little swim, getting out and getting in the cold. And I feel measurably different after being in the cold water than I do beforehand in terms of my stress. So sometimes when I'm so overwhelmed, I'm just like, I've got to get down to the water. And a couple of weeks ago, I just said to the kids, I picked them up after school, I said, I'm feeling really stressed, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. We had a very dear family member in the ICU at the Alfred at the time. And I said, I'm going to the beach. Anyone coming? And they're like, nope. So I'm like, cool. Drop them home, put my bathers on them, wrap my towel around me. Literally took the dog, went in the water, spent about 10, 15 minutes in the water, jumped back in the car, just wrapped in a towel and headed off home. And it was just what I needed. And you don't have to be in 2 or 3 degree water. Like with an ice bath, you're probably looking at about 6 degrees. A really, really cold water can actually really cause some stress, physiological stress to begin with. And so I like getting in the bay. It's probably about, 13, 14, 15 degrees. And it's chilly. It's really cold, but it's not so shocking that my body reacts in a very strong way. When I get out, I feel so much calmer. So it changes our neurochemistry. It obviously affects our nervous system, and it also helps us build resilience to stress. I remember thinking at that time that my gorgeous auntie was on life support, and here I am, I'm about to just, hesitating to go under the cold water. I'm like, well, if she can do that, I can do this. And one of the things I also use when it comes to cold water is Mel Robbins' 5-4-3-2-1 strategy. If you haven't used it, it's brilliant for getting out of bed, getting started doing something where you're procrastinating, diving in the cold water. If you can have the awareness of using this strategy, you can simply just say to yourself, right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Once you start counting, you're focused on the counting. You are counting down and you know you're going to do it. You know you have to get out of bed. You know you have to turn YouTube off. You know you have to start that work. You know you have to, you want to be in the water. You're here for a reason. Sometimes it's hard to do the thing you know you need to or want to do. And so that 5-4-3-2-1 strategy I found is just a game changer, especially on those mornings where the doona and the pillow are just calling my name and don't want to let me go. So that's something that you could try as well. You know I love dogs. You know I love our gorgeous Dusty. And if you are struggling with your stress levels and anxiety, if you have a pet, you have all of these benefits at your fingertips, because when we spend time with our animals, they actually help co-regulate us. All right, so their calm nervous system helps to calm our own. And some pets seem to have a sense about how we're going in terms of how we're feeling and can often give us just what we need in those moments. So we know that we release oxytocin when we are spending time with people that we love or with our animals, and it actually really creates beautiful feelings of warmth and connection, and that can really help to calm and settle us down. It activates our parasympathetic nervous system, and just the sensory input through patting the dog. And I know with Dusty, he has sort of coarser hair on his back than he does the soft, fluffy sort of fur around his face. He's a border collie. He's got one brown coloured eye and one blue coloured eye, and he, sometimes has leaves stuck in his. And so I end up finding that I'm patting him, I'm noticing him, I'm paying attention to him. That's engaging my senses, and it's taking my attention away from what might be causing me anxiety as well. So it can be just, if nothing else, a really beautiful distraction. And the very last thing, and this I do often, is I talk to my friends and family. When it comes to having anxiety or feeling very stressed or worried about something, the adage that a problem shared is a problem halved really does ring true. But I do know that so many people don't necessarily have someone to talk to get support. And so I urge you to think about what's available to you in your community, what support networks are available online, what might be available, on, or who might be able to support you on the other end of a telephone call through other support networks. But when we can share a little bit about what's happening with a friend or with a family member, talking to someone can help us to kind of understand more about how we think and feel about what's happening. We know that when we can tell silently to ourselves, we can name how we're feeling, or when we say it out loud to someone else, that reduces the activity of the emotional part of the brain. It increases activity of the forebrain, the part of the brain that helps us to regulate our emotions, and it can help us to feel less stressed and overwhelmed about what it is that we're experiencing. And so I guess really my ninth and final for today idea that I really count on and rely on is speaking to friends and family and my husband about what is going on. And I might speak to different people depending on what it is I'm faced with, what challenge I'm faced with, because I might go to a particular friend who I know is going to really relate to that or understand it or has been through it. And so spending time with other people helps us to co-regulate. So they help co-regulate us, which can help reduce our stress and anxiety. And it can really just have the most profound impact on how we feel. Sharing how we feel can often just release some of that stress and anxiety and help us to feel more calm, more grounded, and have a better picture of how we want to move forward. So the 9 ideas I've shared today are seeing your GP, engaging in therapy, medication I spoke about, meditation, exercise, breathing and the powerful impacts of breathing on our anxiety, cold water, spending time with our pets, and last of all, connecting with other people. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all of your beautiful comments, feedback, and reviews of the podcast. I read every single one. If you are not already, please follow this podcast so that it drops into your feed every single Wednesday. And if this episode was helpful, maybe share it with a friend. Follow me on Instagram at Dr. Jodi Richardson and let me know which of these is going to be the next thing that you are going to add to your toolkit. Thanks again for spending some of your time with me, and I will be back with you again next week. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.